Reserve static lines. Most dual deployments have no concern for the reserve static line. However, there are a couple of manufacturers out there that say, hey, for a dual deployment, you should disconnect RSL before going through any other emergency procedures. I don't like to have to do that. I think that that's kind of an extra step that most jumpers wouldn't like to have to follow. However, most rigs, it's not a problem. There are two different systems out there, RSL systems, that it could be a problem. Now let's go ahead and identify those. One is the double guide ring RSL that you can find on a lot of older Javelins and some other manufacturers as well. Or the other one is the two-sided RSL that you can find on only one U.S. manufacturer that I know of, and I don't know of any others in the world. So we'll talk about each of these and what is the dangers of those in a dual deployment. All right, so the first one is that double guide ring. So the RSL ring is between the two guide rings, as I'll show you here in the picture. And when that RSL, when you cut away, that riser leaves and that center ring pulls the cable, which extracts the pin. It goes through the one guide ring, through the RSL ring, and it falls back down. At that point, once that RSL has been pulled, the reserve's on its way out. Well, in a dual deployment, the reserve has already come out. So the RSL doesn't have a job anymore. So there's a really strange thing that can happen with the double guide ring. It's extremely rare, but I do know of two cases where it did happen. And that's what you can see here in this next video. All right, so here in this photo, it shows the double guide ring, and it shows the RSL ring located between them. When you cut away and the riser leaves, you can see it bends the cable there, extracts the pin, then the pin then goes through the guide ring, through the RSL ring, and then it falls back down on top of the flat. And so that's what it would normally do, right? Well, when the RSL or when the reserve has already been deployed, it's possible that the reserve ripcord cable has already been moved for some reason. And you could end up with that, where you have the pin lodged between the guide rings and the RSL ring in between them. I know of two jumpers that this happened to, so it's extremely rare. One was a rigger, and he knew what was going on because he had already cut away the main, yet he's flying along and the main's still following him. And he saw that it was the RSL was holding it. So I don't know how he knew this, but he reached down, stroked the reserve, and released the main. I would have never thought of that. So he was pretty on it. So I know of another gal that had the same thing happen. She didn't know why the RSL was still holding on. She ended up landing safely. She had a hard landing, but she wasn't hurt. So this is a possibility. And the only other rig that I know of that has this would be for the military, and that would be the RA1 Raider Intruder system that has the two guide rings. So that's the only other one that I know of besides the older Javelins. The newer Javelins, they've changed that, and you don't see that anymore. All right, so the other RSL that has an impact on a dual deployment is the two-sided RSL, where you have the RSL hooked up to the right riser and the left riser. And as you can see in the picture here, as that riser, as you cut away, those risers leave, and there's a break in the reserve ripcord housing, and that's where it pulls the cable through right there, as you can see in the picture here. So whenever that happens, that's okay. The only thing is, what if the reserve opens first and then the main opens second? Now that RSL is actually going around the reserve parachute. And so for that reason, this is kind of a tricky design. And they say for a dual deployment, before you get rid of the main, you need to disconnect RSL in this situation. So if you don't disconnect RSL, as you're going to see in this next video, you'll have the situation where this jumper who was on a wingsuit had a pilot chute in tow. He cuts away, pulls his reserve opens, but then the main, because the reserve opened first, the main comes out and the RSL goes around the reserve and closes it 100%. All right, so here you go. Here's the video. So you can see he's wingsuiting, pilot chute in tow. He throws it out, nothing happens. So he cuts away, pulls the reserve opens beautifully. But now that RSL that goes all the way around is going to close off the reserve. And this is exactly what happens with this system if you don't disconnect the RSL. So it's going to slide all the way up, And now he's going to land under his main parachute. Once this occurs, you have absolutely no control of the situation. So this jumper is going to have to actually just hang on and go for the ride. He gets pretty lucky here because the main risers are fairly even. If the main risers get like this, the way the RSL is snagged on the reserve, then they're going to spiral in and can be killed, which I actually saw that happen to a person. If the risers are fairly even, like what he has here, well then the turn is slow enough that you're just going to have to deal with wherever you land. This guy, this is out at Paris Valley out in California, and he obviously has a pretty good landing here. He has some pretty open area to land in. It's kind of funny here, he's wearing a wingsuit, and so he goes to unzip his legs because he's thinking, I'm going to get ready for a PLF, but then he thinks, wait a minute, that's drag. So then he sticks his legs out, sticks his arms out, and if I was him, I'd be going, I'd be doing everything I can to try to create as much drag as possible. So he does a pretty good job at that. And as you can see with this video, he's coming down fairly slow. He's got a pretty good size main. It's fairly even. It's in a pretty slow turn. And he's just going to take the landing in this nice grassy field that he landed in. And yeah, it's a pretty good hit, but he got up, walked away without any injury. However, other people haven't been as lucky. Let's talk about hook knives. A single line snagged on you somewhere, which is causing the canopies to do crazy stuff, that would be a great use for a hook knife. One of the things you got to be careful about with a hook knife, though, a hook knife is a precision instrument. Use it with precision. Never slash at anything. You always pluck. Anything under tension, it's going to cut like butter. Anything not under tension, you have to create tension to cut it. So be careful with the knife. Don't just start hacking at stuff. People have actually hacked lines off of their reserve and been killed because they got a little too happy with the knife. So it's a precision instrument. Use it with precision. All right, so that's pretty much the presentation for dual deployment. So I've got a couple questions for you, just to remind you for the very end here. Question 1. If both canopies are deployed above 1,000 feet, what 2 tasks must a jumper perform prior to cutting away that main parachute? All right, so the answer would be check for entanglement. Make sure you're 100% certain that they're not entangled in any way. Separate the canopies using left on left of the left or left on left of the rear, depending on the side-by-side or if it's a biplane. Once they're separated, then cut away and let go of everything. Whatever you're holding in that left hand, remember, we're not choosing main or reserve. We're just choosing canopy on the left. So it might be the canopy you're cutting away, in which you need to let go because it'll rip your shoulder apart, or it might be the reserve, in which you need to let go so you don't keep turning all the way around and running into the canopy you just got rid of. If the canopies are entangled, the jumper's not sure if they're entangled, or you find yourself below 1,000 feet AGL, what should you do? All right, the answer would be bring those canopies together using the rear risers with the brakes set or using the toggles of the one that you're holding half brakes to get the canopies touching overhead. Remember, keep them touching. Do not let them separate and downplane. If we are having them in a side-by-side or a biplane, remember, we can steer this. Steer by gently pushing one canopy towards the other one in the side-by-side, or steering the front canopy and the rear canopy will follow. Using those rear risers to control that front parachute. Because of all these are unusual situations, they require you being unusual in your response and being creative in some situations. This next video I'm going to show you, I found it on the internet off Friday Freakout, but it's one of the most incredible saves of a jumper I've ever seen. This is a jumper that never gives up, and he does a great job. So as you can see here, he just jumped out of that 182. He just deployed, he's doing a hop and pop, deploys his main, has a spinning malfunction. Right away, cuts away, pulls his reserve, but the main doesn't leave. And what happens next is incredible. Let's go ahead and watch the video. So here he goes, he starts spinning. All right, I can't control that, cut away, reserve, and when he looks up, the main's still there. So now the reserve and the main are spinning together. Go ahead and get rid of those handles, bro. You need to get rid of them and get busy. He's got a lot of work to do now. So when he looks up right here on this video, what he sees, that's 90 miles per hour into the earth. That's 100% fatal. But this kid says not today. And he's going so fast with his free fall speed, he takes his leg and untwists the canopies. He spins himself. Look how fast he gets his body going here. He starts spinning his body so fast that he untangles the two canopies, and then this. Ta-da! Oh my gosh, I can't believe he did that. All right, so here's that thing. Here's a good job for a hook knife. Take the knife and pluck. Get rid of that. And then get busy steering that reserve. So you see how he's got that twist, right? Turn the twist, reach above the risers, grab the lines, and start steering left, buddy. Come on, man. Steer left. Steer left. Don't mess with the main. You can't mess with that no more. You need to steer left. Go for the grass. Go for the grass, buddy. Quit messing with the main. Go for the grass. Go for the grass. Come on. You can make it. You can make it. Uh-oh. Whack. That's going to leave a mark. However, go to the next video here and check this out. That kid gets up. He is going to be purple down one side of his body, but he got up. So here comes his buzz. Hey, man, give me a hug. Let's hug it out. We got to hug it out, man. And he deserves a hug. If anybody deserves a hug, that man deserves a hug. So what he ended up having is he had bad packing technique. When they put the main parachute into the container, you can see how one line of the main got snagged on the closing loop. So when he threw that main out, one of those lines was tied to his back. So that's the reason it was spinning. That's also the reason when he pulled the cutaway handle, it didn't go anywhere because it was tied to him the whole time. But the fact that this, just be careful how you put your main into your main container, and look where your lines are. Don't just throw them in there willy-nilly. Be careful about it. Make it like your life depends on it, because in a situation like that, it could. So these are unusual situations. They call for unusual responses, and that was one of the most creative responses I've ever seen. So good on him for saving his own life and never, ever giving up. All right, so in closing, a dual deployment is an unusual Canopy emergency procedure. So do what you can. Try to study this, learn as much as you can from it. Remember that no two situations are identical. There are always going to be slight differences, but these are the basics for how to deal with these situations. If you have any questions about this, you can reach me at that email address below or at that phone number. Also, if you have videos of things that have happened either in this dual deployment world, I would love to see them. I'd like to put them online and talk about them and make a reference to them so that we can discuss it. Obviously, everything we talked about, like I said in the beginning here, had to do with fairly light wing loadings. We're not talking about Valkyrie 79s with PD-113 reserves. Everything we talked about still works, but way more twitchier, and the landing that you may end up with may not be one that you walk away from. You may end up hurt. Might be survivable, but you may still get hurt. So with the little tiny canopies, there are a few things that get a little different. But if we'd like to discuss that, I'd like to put that out there for everybody.